This is Gemara and Beitzah Daf Chof Hey. All the learning for this month, the month of Tishrei, has been sponsored by Zechos Refuah Shlema for Shlomo Ben Yutim Mirtashem. He should have a continued recovery, as well as this week, as we conclude the week of Sukkot, has been generously sponsored as a Zechos Ili Neshama for Zahava Bas David Alevi, whose yahrzeit was on Zayin Tishrei. Of course, all our Chedim should have a tremendous Refuah Shlema. Shmuel Yosef Ben Yafreda Meni Mevega Chaim Yisar Shem Simon Reis Asar Bas Kanendel Ita Bas Yim Bas Chaisei Yisrael Ben Dol Ezer Berzim Shalei Shamas Naomi Beshaviv Shechan Shmuel Tin Din Chamez and Chaim Yisrael Mina. As well as a shidduch for Yisrael Chaim ben Devayer, Shemiriam Bas, Rizel Gittel, Shandel, Esther Bas Shechana Malkel, Yomorchem ben Dava Shendel, Esther Gittel Bas Dava Shendel. We pick it up on the top of Chof Hey Amid Aleph. First, a bit of an apology. I'm sorry, this daf did not get up before Shabbos. My apologies, and a little bit of internet issues here upstate. So it might be a drop late, but Amir Tashem will get it up the next half, and hopefully the ones before Yontif. So let's take it up. Amar Rabba Barahuna. We are 2 lines from the top. Chavei Amir Aleph Beitzah, moving along in the third parak. Amar Rabba Ravuna Amar Rav Hasukar Aseicher Amas Amayim Me'erev Yontif. If someone plugs up a canal before Yontif, Ulamachar, and the next day on Yontif, what happens? Hishkim, he gets up early, Yumatba Dagim, and he finds fish in his canal, a little fish pond. He plugs it up, and wonderful, Yontif morning, fresh fish. How amazing! What is the status of these fish? Says Arba Achana, Mutarim. Those fish are mutar. Amar Rav Chisda, says Rav Chisda, Midivi Rabbeinu, for the words of Rabbeinu, for the words of Rav. No more we can learn the Chaya Shekinah Pardes. Says Rav Chisda, if a wild animal made a home in a pardes, in an orchard, and what happens? And it gives birth there. So you have a little baby chaya. What's the status of that chaya? Says Rav Chisda, Einoi tzricha zimun. You don't have to prepare that. You don't have to designate that animal. It was born before Yontif. You're allowed to shecht that animal on Yontif. Amar Rav Nachman. Nachman says, what are you talking about? Nofal Chavrin Baravasa. Our friend Rav Chisda Chavrin, he fall into it's a big machlekes. How can you say that you're learning from Rav? That if an animal is born in Erev Yontif, you'll have to shecht it. Says Rav Nachman, what are you talking about? First, the Gemara interjects. Some explain it was Amar Rabba Rav Huna Midiv Rabbeinu Nelmad. It wasn't Rav Chisda, but it's Rabba Rav Huna, and he said. Rabbi Ravuna was one that said that we learned that halacha of Chaya Shekinah B'Pardes in Zimun. So either it's Rav Chisda or it's Rabbi Ravuna, and what are they learning? They're learning a diak from the previous din of Rav, that if a Chaya gives birth in Erev Yontif, that animal automatically, intrinsically, is prepared for Yontif, and you don't have to do anything else. Now, back to the rebuttal, back to the words of Rav Nachman, Rav Nachman, Nachal Bar Chavin Rav Vasa, our friend Rav Huna, has fallen into a debate. So again, whether it's Rav Chisda or Rav Huna, Rav Nachman takes issue with this ruling. And now the Gemara explains the difference between this case and the aforementioned case of Rav. Hasam explains the Gemara, like Avin Maisa. Over there by the numar animal, did you do anything? When this chaya gave birth in Erev Yontif, you did nothing. The animal just gave birth. But a halacha, what was the case of Rav that we started off with today? The case was Asoykir Amas Hamayim in the third line. The case was that you plugged up, you did a ma'isa. You did something on Erev Yontif. So says Rav Nachman, ma'isa. So how can you learn and extrapolate one from the other? Again, Rav said, Allah, if you plug up a fish pond, whatever fish comes into there, it's good to go. You don't have to worry about it. Eat on Yontif to your heart's content. Says Rav Chisda, says Rav Ravuna, the same halacha is if an animal gives birth in Erev Yontif, it's automatically hazmana, it's automatically prepared for Yontif. Says Rav Nachman, there's a tremendous difference. By the fish pond, you did something, you prepared it. Over here, you didn't do anything, it happened all by itself. Now the Gemara continues. So not only did we ask a question on the case of the Chaya giving birth, now the Gemara goes back and the Gemara says, what exactly is this halacha of the chaya? V'lo zimun, does it not need zimun? V'atanya, does it not need to be designated? V'atanya chaya shekinah b'pardes sricha lezamein. So first we ask, the first question the Gemara asks is on the diuk. The first question the Gemara asks is, sorry about that. Oh, Okay, one more time. The first question the Gemara asks is on the diak, that the case of the chaya giving birth is not the same as the fish pond. That was question number one. Question number two is on the din itself, is that we have a Beitzah that contradicts it. The Beitzah says that the chaya that makes its home in the orchard and gives birth, you have to designate it before Yantif. And similarly, this Beitzah continues, if we have a roaming bird, you have to clip its wings, so bima, so that it doesn't come confused with its mother. And this was Eidos, this was a Beitzah that was said over in front of Shmaya and Avtalion. So says the Gemara, we have two problems with this halacha of Rav Chisda or Rav Ravuna. Either, first of all, it doesn't exactly equate to the din of Rav, and second of all, it's a Befeirush Beitzah that was said over B'fnei Shmaya and Avtalion that says not this way. Answers the Gemara, the obvious answer, I'm sorry, you are incorrect. And if a chaya gives birth in Arab Yantif, it has to be lezamein, it has to be set aside and designated for Yantif usage. Says the Gemara, let's go a bit further into this chaya giving birth. We ask again, does it actually have to be mizamin? Do you actually have to designate it? Beishami and Beisel both admit that if one designated birds in a nest, and what happens with this goes all the way back to the beginning of the Masechta, and you find the birds in front of the cane, in front of the nest. What is Allah Shasurim? And we explained by Medvar Mamurim, when are they forbidden? That's only in a case of the dovecote or dovecote in the attic in the Aliyah, or or a case of Sipairim, or these birds that they were placed in Tfichim, which are jars of a bira, of a larger house, of a mansion. Avol explains the Beitzah. Avazim etarnegoilim. If we have geese, if we have chickens, or we have yoinim of hardis. Or number 4, v'chayo shekinah bepardis. Of course, these are the critical words. What is the din? Says the Beitzah of v'chayo shekinah bepardis. The first Beitzah Shemayin of Talyon said one halacha. Says the Beitzah over here, mutarin vein srichen zimun, and they do not have to be designated. Now the Beitzah continues. You have to clip its wings. You have to tie them up. And similarly, if birds that were tied up or they were used before Yantif, if it's in the houses, if it's in the pools, if it's in the ditches, if it's in the caves, mutarim, they are permitted. But if they're in the trees, asurin, then they are forbidden. For what reason? Explains the Gemara in the first wide line. Shema ya'lev yitlosh. You might go up into a tree and you're going to come to break off a branch. Of course, a totally different thing, similar to why you're not allowed to ride an animal, but it's nothing to do with our discussion. But what do we see very clearly? This is a Beitzah that says that tzricha lizamin. Let's go back and just highlight those words. It said 4 lines from the wide lines. It said v'chay shekinah b'baris mutarin ve'ein tzrichen ziman. That was one Beitzah, whereas the Beitzah in Shemaya of Italian said the other way. Says the Gemara further into this Beitzah, and if they're tied, if they're used for Yantif, they're forbidden for a different reason. Mishum Gezel, because you cannot steal. So now we have a steer in Beitzahs. If we were to summarize the Amud until we have to now, we start off with din of Rav. You have a canal that you plugged it up. The fish are mutter. Came Rav Chisda. Came Rav Ravuna. What is the status of a chaya? A wild animal makes its home in an orchard, gives birth in Erev Yantif. Is that animal intrinsically prepared for Yantif, or do you have to be mizami? Do you have to designate it? Said Rav Chisda, said Rav Ravuna, just like the case of the fish, it's mutter. You don't need to designate it. Ask the Gemara. We have a Beitzah. They said over of Shemai and Avtalion that you have to be mizami it. Says the Gemara. 1 second. We have another Beitzah that says you don't have to be mezamin, you don't have to designate it. So we have contradictory Beitzahs. We have the din of Rav Chisda and Rav Ravuna. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Nachman loikasha haba ha be'ima. Don't ask a question for the second Beitzah. When the second Beitzah said loy tzricha lezamin, you do not have to designate it. That's referring to the newborn animal. Ha be'ima. When the first Beitzah said you have to designate it, that was referring to the mami. Ask the Gemara 1 second. Iman beziman sagila. What's going on? The mother. If you designate it and you say that animal I'm going to use for Yantif, that suffices. Then in Yantif you can go take it and shacht it. Say Demal Yasabai. What's going on? You're going to have to trap it. You can't trap it on Yantif. Says the Gemara, you're right. They're both talking about the baby, and we have contradicting brises. Do you have to be mezamin? Do you have to designate it? Says the Gemara, "Habegina smucha li'ir, habegina she'enai smucha li'ir." When the second brise says you do not have to designate it, that's a garden that's near the town, and therefore automatically we assume that which is born, we assume that there are people that know about it in the town, and they planned on using it for Yantiv, so that automatic is like a implied and implicit designation. Or if it's not near the city, then it's not. That is the sugya of designating an animal that was born on Erev Yantiv. Says the Gemara, now we continue with further into the halachas of when you let a shecht an animal on Yantiv or not. And now, till now we spoke about the trapping the animal, now we go into the shchita, the slaughtering of the animal on Yantiv. Says the Mishnah, Chavei Amid Aleph towards the bottom. Behema misukanes lo yishchait. You have an animal that's a misukan, it's dangerously ill, it might die any moment. Lo yishchait, you're not allowed to shecht on Yantiv. Elim kain. What's going on over here is you see an animal, that animal looks like he's about to kick, and you're all nervous. If the animal dies, of course, it becomes an avela, and then you can't eat it. So you want to go and you want to shecht it before it dies. The question is, you really aren't shechting it for Yantiv, you're shechting it to save the animal. Says the Mishnah, if you have time, that you can eat a Concise tzli, that you can roast a piece of the meat after the shechita and then eat it, then it's fine. But if you don't have the time for that, then you're not allowed to shecht it. Rav Akiva Omer a bit more lenient. Afilu Concise chai mebeis hatzvichasa. It's enough even if you could take a chunk of meat raw from the place that you slaughter it, the place of the shechita. That's enough even if you can't roast it. Next case in the Mishnah. Shachta v'sad l'avyenim b'moita b'moita. Avol mevi. Biyadai evarim. A new halacha says the Mishnah: if you shecht an animal out in the fields, you're not. Oh, and we're having light issues today. I'm sorry. Oh, there it goes. One more time. Okay, apologies. Says the Mishnah, second halacha: shachta b'sad. If you shecht in the field, what's the halacha? Lo yavyenu b'moit u'b'moita. You're not allowed to carry it back on a pole, or a different type of pole. Rather, you have to take it in your hands piece by piece. We'll see in the Gemara, this is more that it looks like a weekday activity, and we'll get to there in a few moments. And actually, Rashi already, we'll just peek at Rashi. Rashi points out on the third by line, B'shnei b'nei Adam Shem Da'av Shamilsi. On Yantiv, two people with a big pole carrying back your animal. That's a zilzul, you cannot do it. Says the Gemara, Amar Rami Bar Abba Hefshev Nituach Ba'ila. You have to skin, you have to dismember an carbon oila, vuadin likitzavim. And the same is true for a katza, for a butcher. Interesting halacha. Says the Gemara, when the Torah says before you bring a carbon, you have to skin the animal and you got to cut up into pieces. And says Rami Bar Abba, the same is for a butcher. What does that mean? Says the Gemara, Mikan lamda Torah derech eretz. The Torah teaches us good midos. Shelo yochal adam basar kodim avshev nituach. It's not proper. Don't take an animal, shecht and grab a piece of meat and eat it. Don't do that. Wait, skin the animal, dismember the animal, and eat it like a mensch. Says the Gemara, Lafuke mai, what are you coming to teach me? Kamash Malan, Lafuke, or not Lafuke, or my Kamash Malan, what's the Chiddush? You come to say not like Rav Huna, what's Rav Huna? Says the Gemara, Dam Rav Huna. An animal, when it's alive, we always assume it's forbidden. It wasn't shechted yet. You don't know if it's a kosher animal. You don't know if it's a treifa. You don't know how it was shechted. Once you shechted, then you could assume that it is allowed to be in unless you know that it was a treifa. So you might think that what did Rami Bar Abba say? Do you have to skin it and you have to dismember it? You know what it's telling me? It's telling me you have to check the animal. It's telling me don't just assume it's kosher. You did a good shechita. Wait, is it a treifa? Is there a defect in the lung, etc.? So comes Rami Bar Abba, skin it, cut it up, and of course in the process you're going to check the animal. Maybe that's the chiddush of Rami Bar Abba. Maybe that's the chiddush of Rami Bar Abba. Ask the Gemara one more time. We're having technical difficulties today. Apologies. Ask the Gemara. But we learned a Mishnah like Rav Huna. That's not like we learned in the Mishnah of Kiva Omer. What did our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah said you're allowed to rip out a piece from the place of slaughter. Clearly, you don't have to dismember. You don't have to skin it. So why are you telling me you have to check to make sure it's not a treifa? My love, basically, you rip it out from the place of the shechita. Says Merlai, mi makim shetoivachas achilasa. You know what it refers to? The place where the animal breaks down the food. Toivachas achilasa, referring to the digestive system. Referring to you have to actually check thoroughly the animal. Says the Gemara, asking further on the last white line. Actually, the last line of the Amid. She says, no, it meant right from there. Hello, Rami Bar Abba, says the Gemara, you know what's going on over here. Turning over to Chavayim the Beis. You know what Rami Bar Abba is teaching us? He's teaching us manners. Like we learned in the Beitzah. Don't chomp down on an onion. Don't chomp down on a garlic from its head, from the top. Rather from the sides, the bottom, the leaves. And if you do, you're a glutton. That's not a way to eat. Eat like a mensch. Don't eat from the top, eat from the bottom. Similarly, you don't take a cup and throw down the whole cup in one swig. If you do that, you are a gargan, you're a guzzler. So similarly, our Mishnah, we're teaching the same halacha. It's the nice way of eating. You first dismember, you first skin your animal, and then you eat it like a mensch. That's the Chiddush of Rami Bar Abba. Tanu Rabbanan, once they're on the theme of Derech Eretz, the Gemara goes on a bit of a tangent. Tanu Rabbanan, 5 lines from the top. If you drink a couple at once, you're a guzzler. Shnayim, you drink it in 2 swigs. Derech Eretz, that's a nice way to drink. Shloisha mikase ariach. But if you sip it, then that's kaisa, that's kaiva. What are you sipping it? That's too much. So to balance, you have to know. And of course, we'll just point out whether this works in our conventional drinking habits. Not 100% clear, but of course, everyone will agree that to take a massive cup and guzzle it down, that would be a problem. Chatzuva, mekata ragleim, ichatzuva, cuts the legs of the wicked, which it's so talking about a type of a root that goes all the way down, and this is going to be an issue. Cuts down the legs of the wicked. Mitia, the young trees. Makate raglein the ketzvaya. Cut the legs of the butcher. What's this? Refers to the young trees. One who doesn't wait for arla means you don't have any patience. No savlanot. So that's kate raglein the ketzvaya. It cuts the legs of the butcher. Someone who eats without skinning and dismembering the animal, like we saw, not making sure it's a treifa. With the boiler nida, similarly, one who cannot wait for his wife to be tar, and he's boiler when she's a nida chas v'shalom, is in the same category. Tarmusa, which is a type of vegetable root that has to be cooked 7 times. Mekat raglayim disaneim shel Yisrael, referring to Klal Yisrael themselves. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, "Yisiv b'nei Yisrael lasas harab b'nei Hashem v'yavdu." As Bailim as Ashtarois, they did wicked in front of Hashem, and they served the Baal, and they served the Ashtarois, different type of Avodah Zarah. Vesalkei Aram, the gods of Aram, Vesalkei Tzidaim, Vesalkei Moav, Vesalkei Bnei Ammon. They serve all these different gods, Chas v'Shalom, Vesalkei Plishtim. Vayazvu as Hashem, they forsake Hashem. V'lo Yavdua, and they did not serve Him. Says the Gemara, wow, lengthy psukim. Mi mashma should never ask with Hashem. Once it told me that they left Hashem, of course, if you leave God, you're not serving God. So what does the pasuk emphasize? They left God. They didn't serve Him. You know what it teaches us? Even this turmis, even this type of food, you boil it 7 times. But after 7 times, you eat it. Becomes sweet. They eat it as a dessert. Yet, my children did not do that. Even after all the Avodah Zarah, says Hashem, they did not come back to me. Says the Gemara, Tana Mishmei D'Rameir Bnei Man Nidna Torah Yisrael. Why was Klal Yisrael given the Torah? Because they're strong-willed. Says in the pasuk, from his right hand, Ish Das is the fiery law. These people, Klal Yisrael, they're fit for them to give the law, Ish, and fire, the strong-willed. The laws of these people are Ish, like fire. If Klal Yisrael did not receive the Torah, if they have no one would be able to stand in front of Klal Yisrael due to their will. And Lakish, there's 3 strong-willed people. Gimel Azinhin. Yisrael b'umais, Klal Yisrael amongst the nations are strong-willed. Kelev b'chayus, the dog amongst the wild animals. Tarnagol ba'ifais, the tarnagol amongst the chickens. V'yishayimrim, and some even say on the first wide line, Af eiz v'behim adaka, the goat amongst the small animals. The Yishamer and some say Avselef Bilanis, the caper bush amongst the trees. And again, that was a bit of a segue. Once we got into Derech Eretz, we got a bit off tangent, and now we get back to our sugya of Shachta B'Asad Eloi V'Yena B'Moit. And we'll conclude this today. Said at the end of the Mishnah, if you shecht in the field, don't bring it in the pole, don't bring it in two people. Av Shamilsa, not Yomtiv. It's a Zilzul Yomtiv to carry it home that way. Says the Gemara Tan Rabban, second white line. Ein Asuma Yaitz B'Makalai. Says the Gemara, we just learned the biggie side that it's not necessarily ulcer, it's just not proper, it's not yontif dik, it's a zilzul yontif. Says the Gemara, similarly, if a blind person, the Mefarshim explained, doesn't mean he's fully blind, it means he doesn't really need his walking stick. You're not allowed to walk out with your walking stick on yontif, because again, it's a zilzul to carry it. And neither could a shepherd go out with his pouch, the shepherd pouch. You can't carry out a person on a chair, a man or a woman. Again, these are actions which aren't in the manner of Yantif. It's a zilzul of Yantif. And again, how incredible to learn such sigyas on Yantif itself. Ask the Gemara, Eini, is it true what you just said? There was an old man, and he used to go out with his folding seat. So we see you're allowed to carry it. They asked Rav Yishua ben Levi, this guy's carrying his chair. It's okay. He needs to go to Shir. He's a Zakin. He's Talmid Chacham. People need him. Don't worry about it. And the Rabbanim relied on the words of Achishakya. I brought out Rav Huna from these places. Hini, Shili, Hini. I brought out Mar Shmuel, Mishmei the Tula Shimsha from these different places. So we see all these big Gedailim, Achishakir and Nachbar Yitzchak, they all went and they were carrying people on chairs. Of course, they didn't have cars on one, and they would carry the Talmid Chachamim, so we see you're allowed to. But you just told me that you're not allowed to carry out someone in Yantif. Answers the Gemara, Hasam Kedam Artaimba over there is like we explained the reason. Am I Rabim Sricham Lei Mutter? That's why. It's not really Mutter. Klal Yisrael need this Zakin, that's why it's allowed. Amar Rav Nachman Lachama Barad Shliach Sivan Kisal Hasan said that when you go, I sent a messenger to Latzion. Kisal Galasam, when you go up to Eretz Yisrael, Akif Vizil Asuma Ditzor, you should detour. And you go up the steps of Sur, Vizil Gabi Rav Yaakov Yidi. Go to Rav Yaakov Yidi. And ask him this question, this pressing question. Kisei Matun Bey, are you allowed to use this chair to carry people on the Yantif? Adaz Lasa, once he got there, Nachnaf Shei Rav Yaakov Yidi, unfortunately, already was Nifter. Kisal Gashchei Rav Zriki, found Rav Zrika. Amrlei Kisei Matun Bey, what's the status? Are you allowed to use these chairs on Yantif? Amrlei Achem Rav Ami, Obavachli Yikatif. You're allowed to carry the person, but you can't do a shoulder on the chair. Says the Gemara, what does that mean? What does that mean? It's a certain way of carrying arm over arm, a certain way of carrying on the shoulder that you can't do. To carry in the chair is one thing, to carry in this manner you cannot. Ask the Gemara, Rav Nachman allowed Yalta to be carried out in this manner on the shoulders. Shiny Yalta to be, so she was scared, so they allowed her, but you're really not supposed to. A Meimer Zucha would do a similar thing, carrying the shoulders and Shabbos during Klala, in order to go, not Shabbos, but during the Yantiv, in order to go to the Shir. Again, we shouldn't be used to because he was afraid they allowed them to carry in that way. Because there's so many people they were pushing, that's what that allowed them to carry on the shoulders. Of course, whether we have these levels of Zilzal, these particular practices, not necessarily, but we certainly see the Yisai, that you have to be careful, the Zilzal, not to do weekday activities, not to do activities that aren't necessarily in the mode and the manner of Yantif, and Mir Chem will pick up for the Mishnah tomorrow.